interview is as the media platform is created, is there usually a discussion with the political actors? Because if there isn't, there could be next time. I think there are a lot of Kenyans there that would have loved to see a debate with all the presidential candidates. So public participation and stakeholder engagement, I think, applies across the board. But given that we're here, I agree totally with what Sheila is saying, that we expect our leaders to be humble enough to avail themselves.
Welcome to Monibi's Apartments. I'm Globa Choti Meshak. Monibis is located at Tasia Embakasi off 75 Road, where you're headed to Utawala. We have a 3-bedroom house that can host you for a day, a month.
Accountability. Because it's one thing to have manifestos, and I don't agree quite with the professor. I think the manifestos have some very good proposals that, if implemented, can transform some of the big issues that bedevil us.
Well, he's saying,
but the challenge
he's saying they are more of the same.
Well, I don't agree with that in terms of substance, but what I do, the question is, where is the accountability? After the promise, how do we ensure implementation? Because we are seeing challenges on leadership and integrity even going into the campaign. We are seeing violations of the basic tenets of the law in the way the political parties have constituted themselves. So the challenge to me is, yes, it's good to have these platforms. We need to have them consistently across the board, not just before the major election, but annually we should have an accountability forum, asking the questions, asking the president.
But I've heard at least the organizers of the debate, say that the culture is picking up. I mean, you look at different neighborhoods, people are hosting candidates for MCA and different groups, whether it's religious groups, whether it is civil society people. There is this demand of the people who are, seeking different offices to come before the people and explain themselves.
It's not just when politicians are seeking votes that they need to field questions. And, this debate is questions mainly from the media, who represent really good questions, but these questions should come from the ground. And I totally agree that this needs to be part of the culture, and as Sheila said, all the way to the local level. Political leaders need to be answerable to the public through these public forums, but also in other ways that we can ensure accountability, because after the promise, then what? And that could explain the undecided, because as Prof says, as Geshira says, if my issues have not been dealt with, why should I then get involved in this very intense electioneering period? It's more of the same.
Okay, I really want us to go into a bit of the manifestos and what these two gentlemen bring to the table. But I think there's an issue here, a national issue that all of us have seen play out with regard to where we are in terms of the preparations for this election that is now just 13 days away. And we've seen some back and forth between IEBC and DCI, for example. I wonder around this table how that makes us feel, and I'll start with you, Houghton.
Although we're probably not the best people to start with. As Amnesty, we don't do very much in terms of election oversight. But let me just give you a couple of thoughts. One is that, we have to keep in mind that public trust and credibility of institutions at a time like this is just so important. To have two independent institutions, the National Police Service / Director of Criminal Investigations and the Electoral Commission, scrapping in public.
All right, I'm always interrupting you because the other candidate, the Agano presidential candidate, is arriving there, David Wahiga Mwaure, and I'll go straight to Lulu Hassan, who is going to be speaking to him in a short while.
Na barabara kabisa, mpenzi mtazamaji, shukran sana Joe Ageyo. Kama mnavyoona tayari David Wahiga Mwaure tayari kishawasili wa chama cha Agano akiwa na mgombea mwenza.
All right, that does seem that we're having a bit of a signal problem there, but yes, the gentleman you just saw there is the Agano presidential candidate, that is David Wahiga Mwaure, who is going to be taking part in this debate. And I just want to continue with that, getting some quick thoughts around this whole thing of what's really happening with the IBC. And I think maybe I go to Dennis.
I don't know. I've always been worried about IEBC preparedness. There are no good signs. We're not seeing good signs. I don't want to be dramatic, but I wonder what these good signs mean in terms of the fate of the election itself, because it seems to be going worse. 2013, we were here. 2017, it got worse. Now we're 2022, it's even worse. It's just not prepared. And I'm
but what's
really
the problem, according to you?
From a technical perspective, I think there's a way in which organization is not being done. The procurement is not being done well. We don't have the audit report from KPMG. We're not sure about ballot papers. Ballot papers are coming before Gazette notices are
Okay,
issued.
Dennis, I'm sorry. We have to go back, and I think we are now ready with the Agano presidential candidate, Wahiga Mwaure.
Na barabara kabisa, mtazamaji, kama mnavyoona David Wahiga Mwaure tayari wa Agano Party kisha wasili kwa mjadala ambao umesubiriwa kwa hamu na gamu. Labda nimuulize mawili matatu kuhusiana na mjadala wa siku hii ya leo. Karibu sana David.
Asante sana dadangu.
Naam, umejitayarisha vipi siku hii ya leo?
Nimejitayarisha kabisa ili nikuje niwaeleze wa Kenya sababu gani ni lazima safari tubadilishe na sababu gani ni lazima wachague mtu mpya na yeye ndiye mimi. Tunakuja kuelewa kwamba hii ni miaka 59 kutoka wakati tulipata uhuru. Tumekuwa na tabu nyingi hata baada ya miaka hiyo yote. Na sisi wengine kama mimi nimeingia katika huu uchaguzi kwa sababu naamini ni wakati wa kufagia na kuleta wapya. Na ya kwamba kila ndoto ya yeyote, hata wewe ambaye huja kuwemo huko ndani, hujulikani, hujuna pesa nyingi ama mahelikopta, unaweza kuwa rais kama vile dada yetu Rupita alivyotuambia kila ndoto ni valid.
Na unahisi vipi kuhusiana na mjadala wetu siku hii ya leo? Unahisi vipi? Hisia zako ni gani?
Mimi kwanza nina furaha kwa sababu ni haki ya Wakenya kutusikia zote. Na natarajia hata kukutana na mgombea yule mwingine, my competitor, na hata wale wengine namwambia wakuje ili Wakenya waelewe. Na mimi kile ninayofurahia ni ya kwamba yale tumekuwa tukiona kule nje, wakati mwingine hata watu hawasikizi sera ni gani. Wanaangalia magari, wanaangalia vipi, mapambo, lakini leo ni wakati wa kusikiza hasa ni nani anaweza kubadilisha maisha yako.
Okay, shukrani sana.
Asante na shukuru.
Okay. Ndio hivyo tumeweza kumsikia David Wahiga Mwaure akisema kwamba ataeleza sera zake kwa upana zaidi, akitumai kwamba yule mgombea mwenzake ambaye ni mpinzani wake Wajackoyah atakuwa yuko naye katika jukwaa lile. Ni mambo ambayo tunasubiri kuona mtazamaji, lakini kwa hivi sasa moja kwa moja na kurudisha kwake Joe Ageyo endelee na wachanganuzi.
Shukran, Lulu Hassan. So the Agano presidential candidate is in the house, and we will have to wait for that because the two platforms couldn't be more different. But we were talking about the IEBC preparedness and the back and forth we are seeing with the DCI. Dennis, I don't know if you had finished your thoughts.
No, for me, it's not the management problem. I think IEBC now presents for us a political and an economic risk.
Wow, that is big. What are you talking about?
It is. The uncertainty behind all these preparations, it's no longer about management and procurement. We're now talking about, are we going to have an election? Are we going to have an election that is successfully executed? Are we going to have an election that is not disputed? These are now political and economic risks. I think that's where we are.
Prof?
So, Joe, this is a historical problem. This is not just IEBC. The previous electoral bodies have had these same levels of institutionalized and government engineering competence because of what elections mean to our governance process. We've not had free and fair elections since 1992. This is not a disputable fact. I think the only credible election we had that we believe the outcome was 2002. So what IEBC exhibits today is a comedy of errors in many respects and institutional incompetence at a colossal, catastrophic level. One scholar of governance called Land Pritchard talks about governance in capability and talks about isomorphic mimicry, where we've created an institution that mimics that which should be a functional institution that runs election. In every sense it looks like, but it doesn't function like one. So I think that in many respects, if you look at the last 4 elections, we've created a system where IBC is kind of an arm of government that inserts itself in diverting and subverting the will of the people. Now, that has created interesting opportunities for perpetrating internal incompetence, in the sense that IBC is just not well organized as an institution with all the capabilities that it needs to run an election. Internally, we talk about procurement issues. We talk about just an election, a plan of action that you would execute to the D-Day of an election. If you ask Chebukati what he's been doing for the last 3 years in preparation for this election, the voter register, the cleaning up of all of that, talking about electoral materials, the ballot papers, the security around that. And as Dennis says, this is an existential risk to the democracy, and is also a threat to the body polity of the country in terms of our sovereignty in many respects.
Sheila, how worried are you about this situation?
Well, the trust deficit levels have always been low for our election management bodies, and largely partly because of how some processes are conducted. Key among them is procurement of key strategic materials.
That must be something you follow keenly.
Yeah, we follow. Yes, we follow that keenly. And one of the things that we had urged IBC earlier on is, in the spirit of open procurement, because we know the problem of procurement in this country, it is actually the center of corruption. Most corruption in this country emanates from public procurement. And so the interest that then the procurement of these strategic materials, the ballot papers, the technology has, it meant that there needed to be an attempt to ensure that there was open communication throughout. Because when you're looking at some of the claims that were made, was it 3 weeks ago, coming from politicians, it comes from that whole organization of procurement. So my own take is that there should have been an attempt to be a bit more open, not a bit more, but actually very open in terms of communication, communicating with stakeholders, including the political class. But the other concern that I have is just the ability of our agencies to be able to work together. When you see that kind of spat between the police and IBC, and you wonder whether these are not some things that could have been resolved, bilaterally. Yeah, we expect them to work together. An election, it requires that you're working very closely with security agencies. And I would have expected that kind of, whether it's a misunderstanding or a dispute or whatever contention, should have been sort out, especially because we know how we easily sensationalize things around elections and politics, especially at this time, with just 2 weeks to the elections. I would have expected that as a matter of national security, this is something that should have been handled. Of course, of course, it's good that it's out in the open, so we know what issues are there, but then we also know that this is something that can potentially, spark several disputes, in regard to the election. And of course, I know the politicians are watching. It's probably a matter, if anyone is preparing the petition, it's already something there.
They are doing more than they're watching. They're talking a lot as well.
Yes. So my concern, Joe, is how our institutions are working, not just the police and IBC, but throughout the planning of this entire election. I have had my concerns in terms of our institutions to be able to work in collaboration. Yeah. Even when you look at how candidates were verified, vetted, and cleared, you could tell that clearly these institutions were not working together. And as a result of that, we now have people who are not credible, who don't meet the qualifications set out in the Constitution, who have been cleared for office. So this problem started earlier on in the election process.
Wow. It all sounds familiar, Wanjiru. Deja vu all over again?
Unfortunately, yes. This is a political problem because the IBC is really, if you look at our democratic trajectory as Irongo was taking us, from the very start, we are trying to build a constitutional democracy. And we are trying to ensure that our governance is guided by the rule of law. That is where we are heading, and we are coming from a context where we had, an authoritarian, very corrupt regime through the 80s, through the 90s, and we are trying to reform this with the Constitution of Kenya. And the IBC continues to be possibly our weakest link in our democratic process. And I would say this is a political problem, because the IBC was not fully constituted until very recently,
last year, yes.
Until last year, and that was a failure on the part you would say it's the political leadership. It's the government of the day, you would say, because having the majority of numbers in the House, having even through the handshake, the government, the administration had the wherewithal to be able to constitute IEBC adequately. Another factor with IEBC we continue to hear is the budget. That they do not get the allocations they need in terms of the budget. We also know there's a lot of horse trading and a lot of efforts to kind of influence. Of course, the way the IBC is designed, political parties have a role in terms of the nominations of the constitution of the commissioners, but we then don't see the independence, and we get a sense there's a lot of interference happening behind the scenes. So the inability of IEBC to win the public trust and the fear that it may, not perform to the level that's needed is a political problem. And then we ask ourselves, we've had several by-elections run by the very IEBC. We now see, as the stakes get very high, this IEBC is not able to, the institutions aren't working together.
All right, we need to go. I think yes, there is. That is Professor Wajackoyah, the Roots presidential candidate. I'm not quite sure what he wants to say, but there he is outside. We'll just take you there and hear what he's talking about. All right, so we will keep that there as we monitor what that is about. But here with my panel, we are monitoring this together. And Prof, I see you are quite perplexed, perhaps amused by what's going on.
No, Dennis just remarked that Wajackoyah is probably standing next to his lawyer, so I'm wondering whether he's going to sue the organizers of the presidential
So we have to be careful what we say here, but we'll have to monitor what that's about as we continue. But I want us to talk a little bit about these two gentlemen and what they have placed on the table. And it is interesting, we're watching Wajackoyah just now, and he has this thing that he calls a 10-point manifesto that has all kinds of things there. There is cannabis that has taken the country by storm, the whole conversation, and he has some people call it ganjanomics because he has all these figures around it, and he has things like hanging the corrupt, he has things like shutting down the SGR, suspending the constitution, and selling all manner of body parts of hyenas and related things. I wonder what the thinking is, first overall, what his approach has been, Dennis, to this campaign, Professor Wajackoyah.
I think for me, actually looking at all the manifestos, I think for me, what he's doing is he's saying, think out of the box. Let's think out of the box.
Some people say it's throwing out the box.
Some people say it's throwing out the box. I think it's, but in a way, and I think I've seen one comment about this, he's saying, let's think about ourselves on a journey to self-reliance. So all these ideas he has, hyenas and snakes and so on, they're all about generating revenue. It's about self-reliance. So for me, that is his message. And I think it's a sensible message. It has radical ideas, but it's a sensible message.
But Professor Witty, you say you haven't seen anything radical.
Well, and again, going back to that part about the manifestos, it's not saying that the manifestos don't exist. The question is how thoughtful and how realistic are these propositions? We've seen two cycles of truly memorable manifestos, 2013, 2017. We saw President Kenyatta run in 2013, in 2017, and actually just throw away the 2013 manifesto, not even make any references to it in terms of continuity. And we've seen him govern from 2017 to now, not even paying attention to any of the ideas that he put forth there. So I think sometimes I just tend to think that they're not even worth the paper they're written on, to the extent that there's no real commitment by these people, and there's no way to hold them accountable. And again, set aside the manifestos. There is a government fiscal plan. There are so many constraints to basically executing government. I don't even know, in more developed democracies, there is a very deep conversation between the presidential candidates and the public service. Treasury, for instance, the key officers that run the bureaucracy in education, for instance, in agriculture, to basically understand what is it that we've been doing. Some of these manifestos read like this country does not even exist, that there is nothing. And these guys are basically reinventing the wheel. And that's what concerns me. But I think for Wajackoyah, there's only one point that I wish the country could pay attention to in his manifesto. I think it's the 8th or 9th one, which talks about reducing the number of devolved units to 8.
Yes.
I think that to me is a very, very sensible proposition.
Yeah.
Let's face it, ladies and gentlemen and fellow citizens, devolution is a millstone on our necks. It is a very expensive enterprise. It is the most expensive way to do what we're trying to do.
And we will talk about...
And it is totally unaccountable. It is expensive in the way that the money has been spent. And we don't even see it. Go to the counties and see the money is in recurrent expenditure. You could spend the money in different ways. Now, the biggest problem is holding the governors accountable. The county assemblies don't hold them accountable. So you can take the money, spend the money in a different way, and get real results for the citizens.
No, you don't agree?
I think we live in two different Kenyas, because this notion that counties are a drain on the budget was created by the Jubilee administration, which was essentially a voted no to the constitution, no to devolution, and refused and failed to transfer resources to the county. They transferred the minimum. At present, with a higher allocation to counties, you're talking about something like 332 billion to counties against a budget of 2.7 trillion. So how is devolution the drain on the neck of the country? The other thing around devolution is, if you look at the extent to which counties have been able to improve agriculture, for instance, during 2020, when the country stopped, agriculture was the only function that continued to sustain the economy of Kenya. Now, these are facts, these are statistics, that it was the one sector that, continued to hold up the GDP of the country. So devolution is a political exercise because it brings power closer to the people, and it also helps in the distribution of resources because Kenya is very unequal. The challenge with devolution is accountability, like you say, but accountability cuts across the board.
But isn't it, Wanjiru, I mean, what I see is where Wajackoyah is saying that we just reduce the number.
Well, the issue is, don't talk about units, let's talk about representation, because devolution is about...
Two different issues.
No, the purpose of devolution, okay, one, Kenya is unequal. So none of us here will disagree that we have to distribute resources equitably. So you have to have an equitable share. But then the other side of that is, where do citizens decide? And how far away do you want the decision to be from the farthest corner of Kenya? So the issue is with whether we have 47 counties. We now have the regional economic blocks that allow these counties to come together and then come up with, the economies of scale and the efficiency. So let us not deny Kenyans the ability to elect their MCA and hold their MCA to account at a level that is close enough, because we've had enough of centralized government. We want more decentralized government, but we want accountable centralized government. So I think on that, devolution is not just about economics. It has assisted economics. If you look at even the increase in property prices, the expansion of services, devolution has assisted that. But there is also a political exercise, and there is Article 1, citizens say, self-governance. You can't have that under centralized government.
Joe, let me just jump in, because every time I jump in...
It's a debate. It's a debate.
All right, just very briefly, yes. Yeah. We just want to do a check on what's happening with the registration, but it's fine. You can make that come.
Okay, so that was a light touch. I mean, I think the thing that we have seen in both of their manifestos, which I think have been interesting, is the focus on anti-corruption, right? So that's the area that they do agree on, but their prescriptions are very different. So I think with the Agano Party, what I saw was a lot of language around, how painful, how onerous, corruption and impunity is, but very few legislative and policy prescriptions and, I guess, programmatic shifts, right? The one thing that I think is interesting there is this idea of shifting prosecutorial powers to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
So we will come and have a fuller conversation on this. I just want to remind our viewers who are watching this all across the screens in this country. We are live on TV and even online following these historic engagements that we have in this country every election cycle. And right now, many people are already arriving here, the audience being properly vetted. And I want to cross live to Kennedy Mureithi, who is standing at our registration desk just to check what's happening there. Is everybody in now? Because we'll be starting this debate in another 45 minutes or so. Kennedy, what's happening where you are?
Well, thank you, Joe, and quite an interesting panel you're having there, discussion. And here on this other side of the registration desk, there is an outpouring of Kenyans who want to watch this live, and they are already being cleared from the registration. There are hundreds of others that are being cleared from the other side where there is the main gate as they come in, and there is also a provision for where they will be sitting as they wait for them to be called on. And there is a serious number of officers who are doing this particular job as they wait to clear everybody that is coming in. But we are having their head, Madam Doris Tanui, on this side, just to give us a glimpse of what is happening and who are you clearing. Are you giving an opportunity for those people who are coming here for the first time, or it is by invite?
We are giving those who have been invited. You come here with an invitation card. And once you get here with your invitation card, we'll give you a QR card to scan with your phone, and then immediately it will tell you to register. Once you register, it syncs into our system. From there, we can be able to print these accreditation cards for them.
So when you're saying that you're coming in and you're given a QR code, does that mean that anybody else who has not received an invitation card from home will come here and receive the QR code?
No, if you have not been given an invitation card, we are not able to print for you a badge, and you cannot be allowed inside the gate.
So probably take us through this process. We are seeing that there are different desks manned by different people. Is it to cater for the different groups that have been invited? As I can see here, my camera person Brian will be showing there is the embassies, there is the Media Owners Association and all that. Then there is the delegates. Probably you could take us through this.
Yeah, from that side, we are able to handle the embassies. We are able to handle the diplomats. And then from these desks, we are accrediting everyone. People come, they sit from that side, then they will be called one by one. They go to various desks, and then they are sorted out to make it move faster.
Well, that is what we are getting, and everybody has been catered for when they make their way to this particular place. And we would, the digital?
This company is called Digital One. We are the one who are doing registration and accreditation.
Yes. And we have already seen an outpouring of people that started early in the morning as they came in. Remember, this auditorium houses about 700 people who will be coming in, and they will be watching from here. But we're also having the security team that is being manned to make sure that everybody who comes here has been vetted, and will be making sure that they come with that particular card, the invitation card that they were given, so as to make sure that the security is smoothless. Hello, madam.
Jambo wa Kenya, jambo wageni. Hapa ni sub-county ya Lang'ata, na huyu ni kamanda mkuu wa polisi eneo hili la Lang'ata, Miss Monica Kimani, na nataka kuambia mambo ya usalama. Tumeweka usalama ambao ni nzuri sana. Kuna sehemu 4 za ukaguzi, kuna main gate, kuna hapa mahali mnaona registrations, kuna pale chini na kwenye auditorium. Kwa hivyo security ni nzuri sana, na tunaomba delegates wale wamealikwa wawe very cooperative kwa sababu ya usalama wao na usalama wa wageni pia ambao tuko na wao kwa wingi.
Well, you're talking about the security that has been enhanced. Probably you will tell us the number of people that are coming in and the number of security officers that you've placed here just to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible.
Thank you. We have over 100 police officers within this compound and many others outside this compound. We have both in civics and in uniform, and so there is no reason to get worried. We are up to the task.
Well, thank you very much, Joe. Just before I get back to you, we'll also want to get a view from one of the delegates who have come here. As we do know that there are those delegates that are also representing the political parties that are involved in this debate. There are those supporters that have come with the 4 presidential candidates that we do expect will be involved in today's debate. We would want to get probably a view from one of them. How are you, sir?
I'm very fine.
What is your name, and today you're here, and how is the feeling, and why not watch from home and come here today?
Basically, my name is Samuel Gutu. Basically, I want to say I'm one of the few delegates that are privileged to come and have a one-on-one interaction with the presidential candidates. I'm here basically to hear them out, to hear their agenda, and probably make an informed decision come 9th of August during the elections.
Thank you, Joe. Those are some of the expectations that most of the people are having today, as they hope that today, when these candidates go on the floor, they will make their submissions, and with those moderators that we are having, we'll be able to interrogate some of these positions that they have put out there, and that decision probably will be made. There is a huge number of undecided Kenyans that are yet to make their decision. And there are those that will be willing to cement their positions today when these debates go on. Right now, I take it back to you, Joe, to continue with your panel discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Kennedy Morezi. They are speaking to various people involved in the registration. We've seen security people there. We've even seen some of the delegates who are arriving. And that is to say that the debate is just minutes away now. At 5:30, that's when the first debate kicks off between Professor George Wajackoyah. We've seen him here already. That is of the Roots Party, and their Ghana presidential candidate, David Wahiga Mwaure. And I have my panel here. They are still here. They haven't left. And as we were talking, there was a whole conversation about Wajackoyah and his federal system sort of proposal. And then there was a bit of fireworks flying here. I was almost getting my helmet, but still I heard you making a sound likely to suggest you wanted to say something.
Yes, you had me right, Joe.
Yes.
On the issue of Wajackoyah's proposals on devolution, I agree with Wanjiru in regard to caution in terms of how we deal with the issue of devolution, but particularly because for me the wastage is across all levels. It's both at the national level and also at the county level. And obviously, there's a question around accountability that
some people say we devolved all the bad manners to.
Yes, we did. We did devolve corruption. We had warned about that many years before the county governments were formed in 2013, and I think we focused a lot on at the national level. Even when you look at our institutions responsible for addressing and oversighting in regard to accountability, they're focused at the national level. And I go back to the question around resourcing for our institutions which are responsible for oversight. And we talked about this when we're talking about IBC, but it's not just IBC. When you go to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the ODPP, the judiciary as well, which is responsible for, is at the last point of the criminal justice chain in terms of listening and hearing and determining, adjudicating corruption cases. They do not have adequate resources to be able to fully perform their mandate to our satisfaction. And you can see that the problem of corruption is quite huge. I think right now as we speak, we are experiencing the highest cost of corruption. But we have not matched our institutions to the resources that are required. But if I can also just speak to the issues around what these candidates have in their manifestos in regard to addressing corruption.
Yeah.
Wajackoyah talks about the death penalty.
Yes, hanging people.
Yes, I'm a bit cautious on this because we also know that we're in a country which respects the right to life. Life is, you know, when you look at our constitution and our laws, and for me, I've always questioned that. Okay, I've seen other countries which do this, but then in that case, you're not really. You know, we want those people alive to get the real punishment in prison. I want the person who was recently, we had, was it 2 years ago, someone was sentenced to 67 years in prison. I want them to spend 67 years in prison.
Well, it's running
to
for
see
election,
the pain
but that's a story for another day.
No, that's a story for here. We'll talk
Yes.
about it as well, because we need to hold our leaders accountable for these people who are coming to debate here and telling us that they are fighting corruption, but they are still giving tickets to people responsible for corruption, and then you tell us that you want to fight corruption with people who have been responsible for corruption. And those are the things we need to call out some of these people for. But so I question Wajackoyah's proposal on this. And then for Mwaure, you've seen that as you have said, his emphasis is on recovery of assets, which is important, because I've not seen people talking about monies that we have lost, billions of shillings stashed out there in foreign countries. I saw that you already wrote a letter to some foreign governments asking for support in terms of, you know, tracing and repatriating that money back into our economy. This is important. Not very many people are talking about this because we are struggling as a country with our economy, inflation, and we really need, this is a time we need all those resources that have been stashed out there to be brought back to be able to, you know, bolster our economy. So I agree with him on that. He's also talked about revisiting some long-lasting corruption cases, KEMSA, Kenren, and NYS and others which have not been resolved. I think this is important. Just be cautious as well.
There's always, okay, yes.
Cautious because even as president, we also expect that he will respect independent institutions.
Exactly, because
the institutions responsible for investigation
that's where I was going
and prosecution.
With that. How viable then is it for a candidate to really come and tell us this is what I'm going to do about corruption? I mean, in the face of what you're talking about, because we have the ESCC, we have the DCI, all of this DPP, everybody doing their bit within this whole chain. What is the president going to do? I mean, the current president famously said, some people now say infamously, munataka nifanye nini jameni?
Well, there's a role that the executive also has to play. That is important, you know, even in terms of, because one of the things that we have struggled in this country is political will, you know, and even just, you know, how are you able to call out your people in government, your colleagues in government who are responsible for corruption? One of the promises of the Jubilee administration 10 years ago was that they would ensure that people who have been indicted for corruption do not hold public office. But then how many people have we seen continue in public office even after being indicted? Okay, so those are some of the things that we see. So it's a political will that is really critical that we need to see coming from the presidency. And there are many other roles that the presidency plays in terms of fighting corruption without necessarily going into the mandate and influencing independent institutions.
Dennis, there are platforms here. So they are gonna. For Wajackoyah, the most outstanding thing about fighting corruption is, of course, kunyonga hao, which Sheila has a more complicated name for the death penalty or capital and whatever, but it's really kunyonga watu, isn't it?
With him. He said hang them with him.
Yes, but then there are other things that the Ghana presidential candidate is proposing, such as the whole asset recovery thing. In fact, he's saying that asset recovery thing should be domiciled in the presidency. He's already written some letters to some foreign embassies and that sort of thing. He's talking about devolving budgeting to village councils, which is not just about corruption, but I guess it's also some of the things that Wanjiru was talking about, taking everything closer to the people. And then talking about the big fish going about.
Budgeting at the national level or at the county level?
At the village.
Devolving it beyond the cascading it further to the villages.
So that is devolved funds going to the villages to make budget proposals about their priorities.
Yeah, like they do in Makueni.
Yeah,
that's how they do their
his
budgeting.
proposal on one of the proposals, at least on devolution, is that the allocation to the counties will be 40%. Right now, of course, there's a whole debate whether it is even 15 or 12 or 10. We really don't know many times, but he's saying he's going to make it 40. and 10 out of the 40 is going to go directly to this,
that's
this village councils that he's talking about.
It's easier said than done, because you see, we already have the sub-units within counties, the sub-counties. And in the current constitution, and what has not been instituted, has been the further devolution below the county level to the sub-counties and below, where you'd go to a ward, for instance, and then have a ward council or a ward forum that basically talks about those priorities. But that envelope has to be allocated by the county assembly. That is the process. There has to be a legislative process that basically looks at the entire pie and then further allocates that, and then at that sub-county, sub-ward level, then you can now talk about ward priorities. Otherwise, the whole thing becomes very unwieldy. And then what is the level of preparedness, preparation, training, capacity building for villagers to be able to do this? I think sometimes we need to be very careful of this fantastical thinking, because this is serious stuff.
But it's happening. It's happening. And sorry to jump in, when we talk about decentralization of the budgeting process, it's happened in Makueni. And there are models that we can look at, such as Makueni, where budgeting process starts at the, in fact, sub-village in terms of prioritization. And they then have a process of, putting together those proposals. And then at the ward level, you have ward kind of budgeting meetings. So if the governor wants to do a county-wide large infrastructure project, like national government did SGR, or they want to build a hospital or something, they have to go to these ward-level meetings and convince villagers, give us this priority because it will help you. So you have a deliberative budgeting process that is well thought out, that is based on structures that are not just set up for the budgeting process, but that exist and have other roles. Linked to that, before
but isn't there a need for that continuous capacity building for them?
They have a whole, exactly. It's political will.
Not the numbers like how many shillings and cents you're going to spend on a bridge.
No, it is. By the way, the budget discussion is based on the proposals, because there is a problem in Kenya's budgeting process, and we've been told this by government, by people in fact in finance, where we do budgeting based on expenditure proposals without the estimates. The estimates are supposed to go together with these proposals, and that's how you wind up then having fantastical projects that then can't be financed.
And I want Dennis to come in, because he's been waiting to do that for a while.
I have a serious problem asking people to solve problems. The whole point of this whole budget process is that we go to Kenyans and we say, what are the issues that are facing you? Then, because we are responsible government, we solve them through policy. Yeah? We don't let people design projects. We solve them through policy, which is then translated to programs, which is policy, which I think this is what Alex is saying here. Right? We need to get this understanding of government proper, that people tell us what the issues are, we translate those into policy, then policy goes into programs and projects.
Budgets.
People and then budgets. That is the correct order of things. We've mixed it up.
In a bottom-up, in a top-down, in a top-down.
In a holistic.
Top-down economics has not worked.
No, in a holistic way.
Top-down economics has not worked.
No.
Kenya has very high inequality.
No, this is not about bottom-up or top-down.
It is not top-down. It's not top-down, because the point really is...
Let Dennis finish.
Is that in a consultative participatory process, the communities generate the issues, the priorities. Now, those have to be consistent with the plans.
We looked at the Bolivia system. They have a two-track system. They have a policy system, and they have a project prioritization system. And you set up the process so that you can balance the issue that you're raising. But the point is, you do not have public participation, and then government or politicians come and torpedo the wishes of the public.
Houghton had a question. Perhaps we can listen.
I have a comment. I think, having been in a number of county-level conversations in my own community, one of the things that I really find frustrating is that we are asked, what do you want? And then you get a laundry list, right?
Exactly.
Now, what people don't tell you is what is available in the budget envelope. Because ultimately, budget making and policy making is trade-offs of choices. If you're not given the information, how do you participate in the trade-off of those decisions? What ends up happening is a group of policy makers or budget makers sitting somewhere in a very small room very far from the rest of the public, make the decisions. We are essentially providing just the fodder, but the actual processing is done by somebody else. I think until we get to a point where we actually have people being able to work out what is the budget for the Kilimani ward, what is the budget for the Nairobi County, and actually start there. What do we want to provide? Let us make the choices, and then have the budget makers essentially formulate the budgets so that essentially we can hold them accountable to that. That's the problem.
Wow. Dennis, had you finished?
No, I think that's exactly it. I think the point is this, that, and in fact, I'll agree with Wanjiro on one thing and disagree with Alex. This is why devolution is important. Devolution is important because we are now starting to realize that the most important person for me is my guy at the ward.
Yeah, the MCA.
My MCA. Then maybe my MP, maybe my governor, and actually this thing we're sitting about doing here is the last one. Let's be honest. Yeah? I'm more interested in my
But we get
MCA.
it. I mean, many people would say that
Dennis, don't get me wrong.
the stakes usually appear higher up here. That's why people fight and
so
kill and
at
do.
a political level, I think devolution is important, and this is why this bottom-up thing works, at a political level. But our devolution is still, I think what Alex is saying, economically inefficient.
Yeah, so I'm not against devolution.
It's economically inefficient
what I'm
at the
saying
moment.
is that the architecture of the devolved structures is problematic. We need to think about how we do this, because there are many ways, as they say, to skin a cat. We've chosen the most expensive way to do it, and it is hemorrhaging public resources. A lot of that money is wasted.
Substantiate the hemorrhage.
Let me give you a very clear example. I once sat on a plane with a governor to Hong Kong, and he told me that he could run his county with 50% of the resource that he receives. He gave me an example of his MCAs going to Kisumu to write on a 3-day retreat, to write him half a page of a memo. I'm just giving you some examples. And he also told me...
But you see... No,
let Alex finish.
Just give me a minute. So that is a live... And the governor is a second-term governor. He's going to leave. And he told me that this is a shared perspective by many of his colleagues, that the process of checks and balances and accountability are still very weak in the current phase of the regime of implementing devolution. Now, what I'm talking about is we need to strengthen that. I'm not against devolution. I'm really for more money to devolution. What I'm saying is that we just need to be very careful that it is still very early days and we need to strengthen those structures of accountability, but also the execution capacity within the counties. A case in point is that you have a CEC and one chief officer to run agriculture, no extension support.
But then how will you get capacity without resources?
Because that's what I'm saying. We just need to go back and think hard about the architecture of the devolution. That's what I'm saying.
Well, I just a small point, and I apologize for, we have even moved off maybe the other issues, but the point is with devolution, I agree with you in terms of there's been a lot of waste. That money that is being wasted by the MCAs should go into service delivery. Now, that is the same case replicated at the national level, whereby we are saying devolution is not the problem. Our problem is the lack of accountability by our political leaders. So back to the question.
That's what I've been saying.
The question
I'm not saying it's a problem.
So in fact, we're in agreement. We need more money to counties. We need it to be accountable at the county level and also at the national level. And that is the big question. How do we solve that? Because we're looking at some of the impacts of devolution. Right now, we have a drought. I think the worst drought in 40 years. And I was given some figures by my colleagues from Oxfam, and they were reminding us, they told me, say this, 4.2 million Kenyans are facing starvation in Kenya. I mean, we readily forget that when we are not on the front line. 90% of open water sources are drying up. They've got maybe 2 or 3 months of water left. That's the magnitude of the crisis. Juxtapose that with the waste, because, the figures that we've lost through corruption are estimated from 700 billion to 1.2 trillion per year in terms of waste. So the issue of accountability or corruption has to be measured in terms of the cost on human life. When you have KEMSA, we lost 7.8 billion during COVID. How do you steal money that we borrowed to help people in the midst of a pandemic? So I think the problem we have is we get lost in the technical and we forget our politicians do this because they can. And it's our politicians and it's some people in levels of government where they're able to subvert our budget processes to enrich themselves at the expense of Kenyans who are losing their lives because of corruption, and that is the issue.
Okay. Let's move on to something I've seen a lot of politicians talk about, which is the whole thing of the gender question, the two-thirds and all of that. And one of the proposals from Agano is perhaps not too detailed, but talking about implementing it in appointive positions, ensuring that happens, but also enhancing access to government procurement opportunities, reservation to youth, women, persons living with disability to 40%. I think it's currently 30%. I was asking Wanjiru, I think, before we started here, whether this whole idea of gender and the two-thirds question that has dogged our constitutional implementation for 10 years now is an election issue in 2022. And Sheila, you go first.
They've tried to pretend that it is an election issue, I think, because they have...
I like your choice of
yeah,
word,
well, that's true, because at the front of it, we've had one... I think it's Kenya Kwanza, which says that half of the appointments will go to cabinet. I mean, half of the appointments in cabinet will go to women.
Yes.
But then I already look at it from the optics, like when you're out there, who's around you. That messaging should start from now. Who's around you? Very few women, already occupying those high places within that particular alliance. But it's not just that. As you know well, they have nominated a woman for the running mate position. But then, for me, it's more or less about optics, because when you looked at the party lists, you remember the party lists that IBC, did not allow and said that parties needed to resubmit new lists. If they couldn't even present us enough women as required, as per the constitutional threshold, during the listing of people to be nominated, do we really trust that they will then offer those appointive positions? Because for me, it's really promises. But I don't think that the gender issue has been a strong matter that we have really canvassed during this campaign season. We've not given it enough attention. And just one thing, because we've talked about it, on the issue of what Mwaure proposes in terms of procurement and ensuring that women and youth get enough opportunities. From our own experience, we know that many times when those companies that are given contracts and have women and youth, it's basically just on paper. The beneficial owners of those companies are actually not the women and youth. Those are just fronts. So we also need to ensure that actually the beneficial ownership of these companies is made up of women and youth. So there's something else that we need to do to ensure that these opportunities are really going to the people who are more deserving of them.
Houghton, I wonder what your thoughts are about this gender question. I remember when you came and found me here, and you were wondering whether
I was about
we're going to be a manual, yeah?
No, I was about to stage a protest. It was only a manual, right? So fortunately, we have two very very articulate women on the panel, as well as the three articulate, somewhat articulate men. No, I think there are a number of issues. I think the political representation of women is critical, right? And it is not even a matter for debate. It is a constitutional threshold that we must meet. The fact of the matter is we're not going to meet it in this election. So I think there is a crisis coming up the other side of the election. The second issue relates to the use of public resources, and I think the point about procurement is an important one. We look forward to hearing more from the two candidates this morning, but this evening. But I think the other issue that I think is really important is making sure that we don't just have women, but we have women with a gendered agenda for this country, right? And we need men with a gendered agenda. So I think we should be asking presidential candidates who are male, what is their gendered perspective about these issues? Let me just give you three very quick ones. We learned last week 5,400 women and girls were raped in the county of Nairobi. What's the agenda to deal with that issue? We have heard that we have one of the highest teenage pregnancies, and the numbers are coming down to like the 10, 11, 12-year-olds, not the preteens, not even the teenagers, but really this very fragile age group. What is our strategy for that? Must we continue to have this sense of denialism around the issue of safe abortion, comprehensive sex education? When are we going to start dealing with the realities that our children are dealing with in a way in which we are not confusing science with our morality? And I think that's the challenge that is forward on the gender issues. I think the very last one for me is this issue around, gender parity, because I think we have to look at this from a really sober perspective. It is estimated that we will not achieve gender parity at these current rates until 2069. That is another 40 years from now plus, will we see women's earnings and men's earnings being similar. At the moment, there is a 23% difference between men and women.
Oh, wow. Wanjiru,
what can I add?
You've been speaking quite a bit, but let's talk about this gender question.
Yes, from a gender perspective and from an inclusion perspective, yes, I think I totally agree, and thanks so much, Irungu, for reminding us how expansive this is. And what I'll add is maybe just 2 quick points, is that at the county assembly level, if political parties do not achieve the gender balance, they will then do a top-up. And that top-up because the county assemblies must have a 2/3 representation. And the top-up of additional members means that the taxpayer pays more and that the size of the county assemblies are bloated. So there's a game that political parties play where they field as many male candidates as they can, and were it not for the IBC racking their knuckles in terms of the nomination list, it would even be worse. So one, the failure to respect the rule of law and the failure to embrace the gender agenda and paying lip service to it costs us in economic terms. The second is we did a study on AgPo, and we found that much as you have preferential procurement for youth, women, and persons with disabilities, the thresholds, of course, are not being met by any stretch. But we also found numerous cases where women were saying they have to give sexual favors. They're being extorted in terms of sexual favors to be able to get the contracts, to be able to get the credit financing that they need. So as Irungu is saying, we also have to look at the governance, but also the social context in which we are living, where women are still not able to participate equitably in economic affairs.
Okay, because we are just about to go for the first debate, so let me just get some quick thoughts, Professor Awiti, and then to Dennis.
So I think the elephant in the room here is where we are as a society, period. The place of women in our society, in the way we are socialized, has still not moved up even one notch. We're basically trying to apply constitutional and legal frameworks as band-aid to a deep, primordial cultural problem, the place of women in society. This has to come up as a movement. You've got to mobilize the senses of men and women out there to basically move the political needle on this one. Otherwise, we're going to be crying out here the whole time with legislation that we can't enact, constitutional provisions that we cannot basically implement. ODM, for instance, carte blanche just renominated all of its MPs in Western Kenya. They had a chance there to make 50% of those women. They didn't do it. So, and the way Martha Karua's nomination as presidential running mate of a major candidate was greeted by UDA colleagues was just shameful. It shows you the deep-seated cultural norms that we still have to deal with in this country to move women's agenda forward.
Dennis?
No, I think I have nothing to add to this. I'll just say a discussion on gender, just like many of the discussions, we have two Kenyas. We have Kenya on paper, which is the constitution. Then we have Kenya qua ground, which is reality, which is what Alex is saying. And that's it.
Okay.
We haven't found a way to reconcile them. And I think we're stuck there.
Okay, so all the ladies and gentlemen on this table, before we go for the debate, what's the one thing that those two gentlemen must not leave that stage without talking about? Let me start with you, Houghton.
No, I would like to address gender. Let's go for that. Gender and women's empowerment.
Yeah.
Culture. How do we move from a low trust and a culture of impunity to a culture of trust, especially the political culture?
Trust?
Yes.
What break it down.
How do we, in the BBI they called it the national ethos. I didn't like that term, but we have a culture where corruption is seen to pay. And a study actually done by Aga Khan University in 2015 is still relevant today because the youth don't mind how I think Kenyans, by any means necessary, you have to make money. We become consumerist, we don't uphold values. So how do we switch that culture? We have enough laws.
Okay, let's go to Sheila.
Integrity for me, because if you're not going to be able to meet all your goals and objectives in your manifesto if you don't look at the software. And that's really our values as a country, the values of the people that you are going to appoint in government, the values of the people around you. That's one question I have, because even for the main, the so-called leading candidates, my question, as they keep on telling us and giving us solutions to corruption, but for me the first problem I see is that they're surrounded by people who have been accused of corruption, some who are even in court, and have been charged with corruption. And so my question therein is, how much do you care about integrity and the values that are so well articulated in Article 10 of our Constitution if you're going to not really consider this as you look at, appointing and propping up people who are going to be part of your campaign and possibly part of your government?
Professor Oti?
Mine is two issues. One is public institutions. Strengthening accountability of public institutions to the public. They should not leave that stage without talking about how they're going to address that. Because the erosion of the efficacy of public institutions is the reason why we're here today as a country. Where we're now talking about, say, Mwaure should not say that he wants to bring in asset recovery into his office. Let's strengthen public institutions in the places where they are and not reconsolidate power in the office of president. The second one is public debt.
But right now we have a lot of independent institutions that are not working.
But how are they going to strengthen them? They should focus on strengthening existing public institutions. Public debt now constitutes about 68% of public liability, 68% of GDP.
Okay, we need to get Dennis one thing, then we just go.
No, mine very quick, since we all said this. Balancing the budget.
Balancing the budget. Okay,
let's
balance the time here as well, because right now we are taking that break that will lead us into the first debate of the evening. That is a debate between the Agano presidential candidate David Wahiga Mwaure and the Roots presidential candidate Professor George Wajackoyah.
Linda familia na marafiki dhidi ya magonjwa.
The UHC coverage journey is on. NHIF is working under the guidance of the Ministry of Health in the UHC Step Up, which presents an opportunity to secure Kenyans access to quality health services without suffering financial hardship. So take the bold step today and safeguard your families by enrolling to NHIF to ensure health for all.
Kwa majina mimi naitwa Moses Kuria, mkaaji wa hapa Bomboruru, ambao tunafanya na kazi na hii sako yetu ya Geno Sako, ambao ruti yetu ni Bomboruru Sabaseri. Kwa hii kadi ya bima nilichukua 2013, ambapo imeshanisaidia 2018, ambapo bibi yangu alikuwa anajifungua, tulienda hospitali tukatibiwa, tukahudumiwa vizuri, alafu wakati wa kutoka hatukuitishwa kitu. Kwa hivyo ningemhimiza makondakta wote na madriver wajiandikishe kwa hii bima yetu, ambapo itakuwa inawasimamia.
Linda familia na marafiki dhidi ya magonjwa.
Leaders don't need to have all the answers. Ordinary people often do. If leaders would just listen. The death penalty breaches human rights. In particular, the right to life and the right to live free from torture or cruelty. The death penalty is a symptom of a culture of violence and not a solution to it.
My name is Wilson Kinywan. I am a lawyer by profession. I specialize in human rights and criminal law. I became a lawyer after suffering
Urwa Dallas Fort Weka asense ya Kenya aiga no tuko batania abagusi bensi ensengima ime na isiko ya Kenya umena amona barali bawo buna Dennis Zadok Edwin Mukaya Videlis Omingo Mochoge Jeremiah Orina Ontiri Alvazad Nyabuto ime abagusi Global Radio bwe manye na boyo gwe semya abagusi Global Radio ekinakyo ekeumbu ky'omugusi.
Welcome to Monibis Apartments. I'm Globa Choti Meshak. Monibis is located at Tasia Embakasi off 75 Road where you're headed to Utawala. We have a 3-bedroom house that can host you for a day, a month, a week, and you will feel comfortable. It's easily accessible, and you're most welcome. You can reach us on 0729 816 420 or 0723 601721. You can always reach us on 0729 816 420 or 0723 601721. Welcome all.
Ine nore asensemo ya bosongo amone chinsemo chirichieta naine nyamira amone chikaunti chichieta naine rogongo rwagusi bono ebinto byabaire buya abagusi Global Radio nero hybrid station yokorwa asorongo rwagusi ekoligererwa nabo igogotegererwa ense engima bono nabo kubeka okorari kwao amona intwe asamagori arense kegima ebe nemebogani oboremi obotugi esukuru chigari chinyomba chobamenyo nabo koraria amona intwe asamagori arense kegima ayebuna omogusi nabo gosanga amona intwe obeke okorari kwao kwebiasara amona korari konde wensi tinore asensemo yomutandao goetera abagusi globalradio.com nabo kurangiri enamba yaito yesimi goetera enoti isano ibere isano isato ibere nye eye moisano isto kianda gose 0753241889 abagusi Global Radio ekenakio ekeumbu kyomogusi.
Welcome to Monibis Apartments. I'm Globa Choti Meshak. Monibis is located at Tasia Embakasi off 75 Road where you're headed to Utawala. We have a 3-bedroom house that can host you for a day, a month, a week, and you will feel comfortable. It's easily accessible, and you're most welcome. You can reach us on 0729 816 420 or 0723 601721. You can always reach us on 0729 816 420 or 0723 601721. Welcome all.
Kumancho matagarari samarieta anguru kusaro nchangu igontegerete radio yetu station ekorukwa bagusi Global Radio asenge ncho yobosemia inde tonyaka batogo serio botaka seitogusi
na inche kurwali kero kankuru kweli mabiria ni gontegerete omugusi Global Radio na abagusi no mugusi etabauti gakinero nche mononko yeruka abagusi Global Radio mbuya mona sega siengia to kwanyarane to serio botaka gusi yeito yali konyarekana gaki timotiga momente mbuya mono sana.
Okay, abantu baminto iga gontegerete abagusi Global Radio
Nchutwensiga igaturagiramo chingeni no chire chinsaga omotere linagu byonse asoboamo ndorwara ndobwena kero kiombura twarwara kero kiomuna kera twensi tutochamo gaiga ase abagusi Global Radio ambiamono.
Okay, motagerete abagusi Global Radio abantu baminto morwara corona nebo kara America inju boka sanitizer ekorusie binyinyi byonsi pinta kobise korwabu ntobwato morobo gosambo bokima nesuguma torio bokimekeni karibu.
Emotegerete abagusi Global Radio all the way from Nyacheki. Thank you.
Unasikiliza Abagusi Global Radio.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Pope Paul VI Learning Resource Center at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa, right here in Nairobi. My name is Ken Mijungu from KTN News.
And I am Smriti Vidyarthi of NTV. Welcome to the first of 2 presidential debates between the 4 presidential candidates cleared to run for president in the forthcoming election. This is the 5th of 6 national televised debates organized through a joint media presidential debates initiative, bringing together literally the entire Kenyan media fraternity.
That's right, and the candidates participating in this debate have agreed to the rules and guidelines requiring them to conduct themselves with utmost decorum, address each other with respect, and extend honor to viewers watching this debate live across all Kenya's broadcast media platforms.
The candidates in the debate have also agreed to observe the highest standard of ethics in their conduct on the debate platform. The candidates are not permitted to carry or refer to their mobile phones or to wear any listening devices, including earphones. A medically recommended hearing aid is exempted from this rule, but luckily we have confirmed that none of the candidates is on a hearing aid.
And once again, ethics and guidelines also remind the candidates that they shall not carry to the debate platform any written material, whether books or journals, manifestos or articles, including even handwritten notes.
Now, each candidate will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement, 2 minutes to answer a question, and 60 seconds for a rebuttal. The topics have carefully been selected after a thorough assessment of the state of our nation and the sentiments of the regular Kenyan voters in various parts of the country.
And in line with the debate rules and best practices, now the questions we shall be asking tonight have not been shared with any of the campaign teams. Neither were they discussed or even formulated in conjunction with anyone. Now the questions are entirely our very own.
An invited audience seated right here in the auditorium has also agreed to the debate rules. They have been fully briefed that cheers, jeers, or any other form of noise is not permitted during the debate. We, however, make an exception now as we request the audience to help us warmly welcome Professor George Wajackoyah and Mr. Mwaure to the stage.
Thank you so much, and from the outset, we'd like to state that Professor George Wajackoyah was in the vicinity of the debate auditorium, and he could also be around, but he has elected not to participate in this debate tonight. But the show must go on.
That's right. Welcome, Mr. Wahiga, to this debate. Thank you for honoring your invitation. You have 2 minutes to make your opening statement.
Thank you for this invite. Nice meeting you, Simriti. Thank you, Ken. My name is David Mwaure Wahiga. I am a father, I'm a husband, I'm a lawyer by profession, I'm an ordained minister of the gospel. I'm the party leader of Agano Party, and as it's obvious now, I'm one of the four persons who are running for presidency this year. Let me start by recognizing all of you who are present here, Wajackoyah and every Kenyan who is listening. Let me also pass greetings of peace to my running mate, to my competitor who is not here, and to the others. I would also like to take the earliest opportunity to pass my condolences to the people who are involved in the Nithi Bridge accident. We have lost a lot of Kenyans as I stand here to talk about the future. But let me end with the few seconds remaining, and because I'm alone, I hope I will be extended a few seconds, to say that I am here as an anti-corruption crusader. I am here as a friend of the people of Kenya and the people of the universe. I am here as a person, a man of peace. We are at a very defining moment in Kenya. For me, the elections of 9th August are very defining. 59 years after independence, we still have to discuss, we still have to find out what we need to do with this nation going into the future. Because the question begs answers. Why is it that 59 years after independence, Kenyans cannot afford not even a single meal per day? Why is it that 59 years after independence, we have such high cost of living than we have had before? Why is it that 59 years after independence, we have such high level of unemployment? And why, 59 years after independence, are we so indebted than we've never done before? And yet, those we were born together with, those we obtained independence with us, a number of them, and many of them have gone on ahead. And right now, they are first worlds, they are even competing with greater nations.
Mr. Wahiga, thank you. Your
Thank
2
you.
minutes was up, and we did accord you a few more seconds since you are alone. Why, Mr. Wahiga, does a man of the cloth, a man of God, want to get deeper into politics here in Kenya and be the president of this nation?
You know, leadership is part of what, if I go spiritual, God created. And in my faith, the Christian faith, we say, I'm a lawyer by profession and a senior lawyer, a senior counsel by virtue of years, with that 9 years to my belt. Not only that, like I have said, I am a person who has lived and watched in this nation, read the history of this nation, read the histories of other nations. And I am here because also the Constitution allows me. I fit the bill to come and run for presidency. But I come again as a new person in this area. This is my second stab at the president, but I've not been there before. But I'm here because I believe the elections of 9th August require a new person, a new bloom, a clean person. We need to change if this nation will go forward. That's why I come in as a man of cloth as well.
Mr. Wahiga, the reasons you give tonight, basically every Kenyan would give them. What is unique in your proposition?
Why should that be my position? I am tired, like Kenyans are. I am disappointed by the leadership we've had so far. I am also one of those Kenyans who've sat back and watched at the leadership that again wants to come back. A lot of us out there and Kenyans are saying, why do we have to recycle them? I'll tell you what leadership is all about. And because I'm a man of the cloth as well, and the cloth reflects who I am. I'm a little disappointed, and doubly disappointed that my competitor couldn't come in. If he would have come in, he would have come in a durag, because that represents who he is. This represents my inner me. But leadership if you have occasion to look, and we read books here, the scripture, the man, one of the people I follow much, is one who was known as King David. And it says, when he was the president, the prime minister of the nation of Israel, it's written of him that he shepherded that nation according to integrity of heart and skillfulness of his hands. Leadership is about taking care, providing, making a way. And that's why, as a man of cloth, as a lawyer, and for the first time we have a lawyer as a presidential candidate, it is so defining that a person like me, because if a man of cloth would follow the ways of the scripture and the ways of our constitution, if he would follow the ways that are right and accepted international standards, he would not steal from his people, we would not have the level of scandals we've had in this nation, which I'll talk in a moment. We will not have our development funds, perfect funds stashed abroad. And this is why we are here. Poor 59 years. Yeah. But nations that we got independence with, and I can just mention two, Singapore, South Korea, smaller nations than ourselves, nations with people who are equally gifted like Kenyans are gifted. We are nowhere near catching up with them. I am here because I believe we've got what it takes as Kenyans. We can do it, and we have a reason after 9 to do it and move forward.
Mr. Wahiga, the church does play a crucial role in national development and in securing our nation in many ways and in bringing guidance to the people. But many would argue that in many ways the church has failed us. What are your thoughts on that?
I wouldn't agree with them. I wouldn't agree with them. To the contrary, my thinking is that the church has not been fully involved in governance, separate but yet a very important partner. Talking about the liberations we've had in this nation, from 1963, the fight for independence, talking about the first liberation, the second, the Constitution review, the church was very key. Religious organizations are important. Faith is an integral part of mankind, and every person, it doesn't matter who it is, believes in something, follows something, and refers to something when the time comes, when push comes, when pull comes to push. But you would have to be specific, because I know the church has been speaking out. We've had Bishop Sokulu, we had Muge, we have Joya still with us, gallant men of this nation. And I can say we are here because of that. Probably what you are referring to is you expect more. This time you have one of them, but also a professional in his own right.
The voices you have mentioned are voices of yesteryears. I'm yet to hear you mention the current voices speaking, because your voice has been silent on this. We haven't heard you condemn what's going on in the country. We haven't seen you come out loud. And specific example, when politicians infiltrate the church and stand at the podium and speak about politics, we have never heard you condemn this.
Well, you know, there are many ways to engage, and I've engaged in my area. Standing for me here is a journey of about 22 years. This is a starting that started from the year 2000. And this is not even my first time to express an interest in leading this nation. This is my 6th stab at an election. And in all that, it's been an expression of the fact that I have been unhappy. I have been unhappy. As a party leader, we have had occasion. We may not probably have been as loud, or if you wish, you may not have covered us. And I'm not referring to you particularly, Ken, but we have spoken out on matters. It's not the first time that I'm speaking against corruption. And you know, there is a greater way of expressing opposition. By your example, by who you were. As I stand here, I know nobody can accuse me of having been involved in any of these scandals. As I stand here, I'm a witness. I am an example of the fact that any Kenyan can run for presidency. As I stand here, I am here to break this sort of wall where we believed only a certain person and peoples. The Catholic Church has been issuing statements. NCCK has done that. Evangelical Alliance. The Muslims have been speaking. Probably It's only that they haven't been covered as much.
You yourself say that this is your 6th stab at an election. You have been unsuccessful in the past, for example, when you ran for governor of Lamu in 2013. So what's different now? What makes you think you will win this race?
There is nothing in life like not giving up. And the trouble we can be in Kenya is if we give up as we go forward to the 9th. One of the persons I followed much is Abraham Lincoln. And if I remember my history right, it was during his 13th attempt, though before that he had won some legislative position, that he became the President of the United States. And when he did that, we know that he's the one who brought about the slavery emancipation, something to date that speaks to this world about the fact that all men and women are created equal. And that's why we can speak tonight as we are here. I am an example of a person who does not give up. I have not lost in every election, I can tell you. Like the last one of 2017, I would tell you that's an election where I believe I was rigged out. It's only that I couldn't get the facts, and I had done my bit. That was the election, if you remember, where one of my competitors said that people were voted through the computer. I was going to be the senator of Lamu County. But here I am. You must live to fight another day. I am here because there is no room for giving up. The trouble in Kenya, we are where we are because we've given up. Right now, as I speak to you, I thank you for this opportunity, Media Council. There are Kenyans who have said, tutapiga kura tu yeyote, fatalistic attitude. But thank you for the opportunity to tell Kenyans that, no, there is still another one. We don't have to recycle. There's change this time.
Maybe because you've not gotten the opportunity, that's why you can stand tall and say you have not been involved in any corruption, perhaps if you had an opportunity. But away from that, as an advocate, would you advocate for the division, complete division between the state and religion?
First, on your first question, it's not that I have not had an opportunity, I have not been appointed at the top. No, I have had occasions where I have led, but also in my private life. You see, it fights from the lowest unit. As a lawyer, I can stand here and say, I have not been accused. I have not stolen clients' money. It's not just here. I've had these positions of responsibility. I've sat on the Council of the Law Society. I've sat in several corporate and non-government and religious boards. But so it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle that I'm in. But coming to your question, would I advocate? I think it's important that state and region be separated. And by that, I think we need to define what that means. Because basically, it's saying that it's like every person in a state should be allowed to exercise their faith without the government imposing on them who it is, what faith they should follow. And that's where the whole principle about state and religion comes from. But also, religious organizations have a very important part to play in the nation. They teach about better ways of living, morals. They bring governments to book. They call out when things are not going right. I do not know of any religion that condones corruption, stealing from the poor, taking money from the sick. You know, I do not know of any religion that talks about fighting, hating your neighbor. I know every religion advocates for the golden rule. Love your neighbor, peace. And they are an important component. And in a Ghana government, in a Mwaure Wahiga government, religious leaders will play a very pivotal role. To the extent I believe, in my government, they'll even sit in cabinet. In my government, when they perform civic duties, which they do, they should even be remunerated because they are helping the government. They are rendering a service.
Mr. Mwaure, the question is, would you want this taken out of the Constitution completely? 32 guarantees this. You're talking to us what exists in the Constitution. What is your view? Would you want it taken off completely, or you still want it to be under the control of the state?
Come again. You need to repeat that question. Let me get you right, Ken.
The question is, what you're telling us tonight is what is entrenched in the Constitution.
Right.
My question is, as an advocate, would you want 32(1) to be expunged completely so that it's not guaranteed in the Constitution?
No, not at all, not at all. The freedom of worship and the separateness of the state and government, those are key. Standing here as a man of color, I'm probably speaking to a person who thinks, now my faith has no place in future. But standing here in who I am inside is a representation of the fact that I'll take care of everybody. Because my faith says, treat all people equal. Become a person of peace. Share equally. Defend the voiceless. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. And exercise not just equality, but equity for all. That is true religion. And for my faith, the Christian faith, that's what it stands for.
Mr. Wahiga, more often than not, we see on television the church being used by politicians, the pulpit being used by politicians for them to play politics. What is your view on this? How are you going to ensure that stops?
It's not all churches that do that. First of all, a number of churches have different requirements and order of how they do things. And some of them permit, some do not. It's also important to recognize that in our society and many societies, church is a place where people meet, is a place that brings people together. I think what's important is to define what can be said within a church context building, a church building context, because the church is a place of worship. And it should not be a place where people should come and attack others, hurl abuses at others. No, that's not true religion. It's not a place where people should come and speak ill of another tribe. It's not a place even where people should come in and condone the sort of things that have made our nation be what it is those many years that I've mentioned. So I would say I don't see a problem either way. The only way, it should be tempered. It should be able to pass the same message for which a church sanctuary or any other faith exists.
But you haven't quite answered the question. What is it that you will do to ensure that those tempers are brought down and dirty politics are not played in church?
I think speaking from here, I would only urge fellow spiritual leaders and religious leaders to, right now we are calling for peace, and I've been calling for that in my campaign. I've been speaking out and reminding Kenyans that we have a life after 9th. We have a nation. Our nation is not completely down and under. There is hope for this nation. And I would just urge them, as the CEO of this nation, I don't think I can order them, nor can I register it as to how they should conduct themselves. But I know our religious leaders of all faiths, and even church leaders who I'm closer to, they know what they should do, and they are listening to us. They are listening to us.
We'll now move to the topic of leadership and integrity. Apart from the professional, real record in the professional service, that's the Law Society of Kenya, and what you have done to the community, you don't have an apparent record of public service. What do you bring to the table to Kenyans, to table and tell them, because of this and that, I stand here tall and I can ask you to give me your vote?
Public service, I don't have a record. I think what you're saying is that I've not been elected or appointed into a position. Yes, there can only probably be one appointment into any given position. I have indicated the number of years that I've been in the legal profession. That's a position of responsibility. I have been involved, I have led a party for the last 16 years. That is a story of success in Kenya. A story of success, a party that has fielded people, a party that has stood up for what it was registered and formed for. Not only that, I have led, as far as I can remember, high school, I was in leadership positions. I have sat in both corporate and other boards where I have given leadership decisions. In all my life, I've found myself being moved to leadership positions, except the one that I'm looking for. But you know what? There is always a time for one to start. There is always an Obama moment and a Mandela moment for a person. I believe this for me is an Obama, is a Mandela, not just for me, but for Kenyans. But if you allow me to turn out your question, Ken.
Yes.
I am not sure I would have wanted to have some experience that I see with some of the leadership that will stand here or has stood here. I wouldn't want that experience. What experience are we talking about of? Running our country down, scandals, corruption, you know, named in every other scandal, and yet they want to be a president. They have named in everything that has brought our nation to its knees, which it is now. If it's not them, it's their relatives, it's people close to them. For me, that is not experience. If that's part of the experience you probably are referring to, I feel I'm so grateful tonight that I'm not part of it. But I can assure you, if I had gotten in that position, I would have been the same person that you're looking at tonight.
Apart from telling Kenyans what you bring to the table, being tried and tested, Mr. Wahiga, is a very big issue in this country. I want you to look at your opponents who are not there tonight and tell Kenyans why you, why not Kenya Kwanza, why not Azimio, and why not Roots, in terms of integrity.
Kenyans, as I said at the beginning, we are at a defining moment. The elections of 9th August are pretty defining for the reasons I said before. High cost of living that we have never had before, high cost of food prices, such high unemployment as we've never had before, such high debt, foreign debt, not to mention the internal debt that we have. A lot of insecurity because we still have nations peoples in Kenya fighting each other. We have had cases of insecurity. And I'm saying we are all here because the leadership we have had before have abdicated their role as leaders to lead, to shepherd, to take care of, to become good stewards, to steward our wealth and take it where it should be to the development of this nation. I am saying I'm different from them. I've not been part of them. I'm not involved. I'm not part of that. The promises they are giving you are promises that they have given before. We had them in 2017. We had them in 2013. We had them in 1997, in 2007. And the question that you Kenyans, you must be asking like I'm asking, what is the difference now? I even want to go further and say, even for those who it is said they might have decided, looking at the four of us, who can you say has made a difference in your life this far? If so, why are we where we are? Why do we still have money that should have been used in developing our country, stashed in nations abroad, illegally obtained and legally stashed? These are public resources. I'm not talking about personal private money. Why are we here at a time like this? And the Auditor General 4 years back tells us 215 billion Kenya shillings from Eurobond cannot be accounted for. It cannot be traced. It is a mystery. Why are we here before? And the Auditor General answer tells us this year that 70 billion Kenya shillings alone has not been used. Why are we here in a year like this when we have that much foreign loan? The Auditor General tells us about 540 billion Kenya shillings is in an accounted expenditure. And yet, this was a government that was supposed to change things. We had hope, but it didn't turn so. I believe the only thing that will move us forward is complete change from the top to the bottom. And what is permanent is only change, as they say. Recycling them will not take us anywhere. That's why this is a very defining election.
But you haven't told us why not those candidates. What, for example, would you want to say about these candidates?
Well, come again.
What would you want to say about these candidates, the other candidates who you're running against for president?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. I would like to say they have been there before. One of them has been a deputy president and is still a deputy president of this republic. He is in government. The things he is saying he can do are things he could have done these last 10 years, these last 20, these last 30, because he's in government that long, and he has not done so. The other one has been a former prime minister. He's been in a coalition, a co-president, if you wish, sharing the government 50-50. The things he is promising are things he could have done, but he has not done. He's been in this race for the last 40 years. And the other one has been in government also. He's been with the police force, he's been in the intelligentsia, and even right now, I believe he is still in there. And the thing I'm saying is, if you take even these last 10 years, let me just take these last 10 years, where we have a deputy president who wants to run for presidency. This year, my team and I have counted these last 10 years, not less than 22 scandals that have taken place in broad daylight. And those are the ones that have been reported. There are others, we are told, are secret agreements about contracts to make roads that we don't know what they say. If you go to the former coalition government, where we had one of my competitors has been a co-president, a prime minister. We have counted about 12 scandals, and they have been there. They were even there in the Mwaure regime. And the final one, you've worked in government, you've traveled across the world, you must know something about our funds which are stashed abroad there. You are in the intelligentsia, you have served, you never retire from that. They don't fit the bill. They are not helping Kenyans.
Okay.
They are not taking what the issues are.
All right, let's turn to our next topic for discussion tonight, and that is the state of the economy. Now, you are on record, Mr. Wahiga, saying that within the first 100 days of assuming office, you will bring down the cost of living for Kenyans. How exactly do you intend to do that, and by how much?
You know, this is a serious matter, and I have not just said. In Kenya, we're facing problems at two levels. There's what you refer to similarity. There's what I consider as a short term, and there is a long term. Up until we called for the reduction, for the reintroduction of the foods, of the unga subsidy, unga was retailing going on to about 250. It was after we had announced in our manifesto that we would bring that. Thankfully, it's been brought down. But that's not all. And I'm glad that we are leading and others are following. We still know that the price of cooking oil is very high. I think now it's about 400. Bread has not come down, retailing 90, 100. Fuel is still at high prices. And those are immediate things. We don't need to wait to restructure our loan, or we don't want to wait, because those are some of the solutions I have had, to plant a kind of plant, probably, and wait for it to be harvested. We don't have to wait, you know, because Kenyans are hungry. They need immediate results. And what I have done, and you'll find that in my manifesto, we sat down with my team of experts and thought, what is the immediate? And our proposals have come in threesome. There was unga, which has been done. Thank you very much. We thank His Excellency, the President. But in the same measure, we say also other things could have come down. But we have said we shall introduce subsidies into other food products. That's number one. Number two, we have also said that we are going to reduce pay by 50% so that Kenyans can have money they can take home with. And that is something that will benefit about 16, 17 million Kenya shillings. If you are earning about 25,000, you'll be able to take an extra 1,000. If you are earning about 35, 40, that's another 4,000. We have also come and said to spur growth, throw some money into the economy. We shall waive away tax penalties that are accrued after the day we are sworn.
All right,
and you know, we are looking for ways to put some money in the pocket of Kenyans, something to spur, something to enable them put food on the table. Because as a country, I'm talking to you while we are broke. We are broke as a country. The most we can do is continue borrowing. I'm looking for solutions from within.
All right,
what can we do now?
And you have said that you would reduce pay by 50%, but pay accounts for 25% of Kenya's tax revenue. How then would you meet revenue targets?
You know, that is not, it's not a problem. And I was going to say that's not the only problem there is in Kenya. If I take away 50%, the amount of pay we get is 460 billion. 460 billion. So 50% will be 230. When I take that money and I put into the pockets of working Kenyans, I tell you as I stand here, it will perform wonders. Kenyans are looking for any extra sharing that they can get. But how do I bridge that gap? We have tried to work around and say, what can we do? And those are short-term measures because Kenyans have to survive. Otherwise, they will die, you know. We pay the taxes, the foreign loan we pay is at 1.3 billion. And we have sat down and said, if we can persuade our friends, and Kenya has many friends, I'm glad they are represented even here by the foreign embassies and diplomats who are here, and tell them, why don't you just accept a repayment of 1 trillion instead of 1.3? That will bring about 300 billion. We can bring back to bridge in the gap, and we are positive that it will be able to do that. But also the 260 billion, that we put into Kenyans' pockets. Kenyans are industrious. Kenyans have goodwill from within. Kenyans are hardworking. And this is a nation that can get money, has had money, and will get money under a new government. The 260 billion, we see it bringing returns because it will go in people starting small businesses. People will be able to start their kiosks or do something else or start what we call side hustles. What Kenyans need is just a little money and they can be able to move forward. The other thing we have thought about is spread the tax base. That's something we are looking into immediately now in office. But I need to talk to you about corruption and the money that's stashed abroad.
We're coming to that.
Yeah, we go to that. But before we talk about that, you're running for president, and you understand also as an advocate of the High Court, that for you to change some of these regulations,